If you think lockdowns...
I think lockdowns were only acceptable as an immediate panic move, which it was, before there were vaccines. The moment they had a successful vaccine program that worked, then there was no justification for further lockdowns.
You're a very important person, and you're very well respected.
I'm not important, I'm a journalist.
No, you're very important, and you're very well respected within the UK, and you've been famous for a very long time. Were you invited to the party at Downing Street, or were you not in that circle?
No.
No? Oh, that's a shame.
And I thought the behavior...
Because they seemed very concerned about COVID on the TV,
and by the way,
they didn't seem to give a shit as soon as the TV was on.
I thought that was disgraceful. And I thought Boris Johnson and the people working at Number 10 who were having those parties, when I had friends of mine who were literally saying goodbye to their mothers on FaceTime on their phone because they weren't allowed in to see them. I knew people in care homes where it ripped through and killed a third of the people in the home in 2 weeks. And the desperation that people felt. I had a cousin who lost his father who couldn't go and see his dying wife and so on.
It's disgusting.
There were terrible stories.
It's criminal.
Terrible stories.
It's disgusting. So let me ask you a question as a professional, because we're both adults and we're both very smart. As a professional, which is more likely, that the government believed COVID was deadly and everybody should be truthfully afraid and locked in their houses, but because they had this spirit inside of them and they couldn't resist the idea of a party, decided to risk their lives to party, or they lied on the television trying to scare everyone and enslave them and lock them in their houses, knowing it's garbage, knowing it's a lie, and not caring, and had a party behind everyone's backs so they didn't think they'd get caught? Which one is more likely as a professional, as a logical human?
Why don't we just agree that they were a bunch of rank hypocrites, stupid people, who were behaving utterly selfishly, to the extent that the Queen, when her husband, Prince Philip, dies, is in the church on her own, in a mass, with none of her family around her after losing a rock of 70 years. And it turned out the night before, Downing Street had, I think, 2 parties, including a karaoke party. I think that was shameful and disgraceful.
Well,
we can agree on that,
right? We can agree on that, and we can wake up and start to realize, oh, maybe the government doesn't care about us. Maybe the government lies to us. Maybe they tell us things and try and scare us, but they don't actually care themselves. Maybe all they are is hypocritical, self-interested people.
Maybe they are.
Maybe they use the MSM to purport their lies, to keep everybody enslaved while they do whatever they want, and that is the matrix in and of itself. And if you speak against it and people listen to you, I'll repeat this. Your ability to speak freely is directly correlated to your insignificance. If you're as big as I was, the most Googled man on the planet telling the truth, you will pay the price, Piers. And that is why I was locked in that cell. And I do not regret it, because I live true to God. I'm not going to sit here as a coward and not tell the truth to people for as long as I live until they put a bullet in my head.
Let me ask you about...
Now, I'm not sure the direct correlation. I can see how you can think it's inverse, but I also just think it depends on the content, what you're saying, the words that you say. Right now, my insignificance is high, so I can say pretty much whatever the hell I want. But as I grow, there will be certain things I can't say, or else I will have to face certain consequences. And that's just facts of life. So he's not incorrect when he says this. Oh. I also think it depends on the content.
About the lover boy method. So the suggestion is that you and your brother and others, let's talk about you, that you deploy the lover boy method, where you would make women fall in love with you. You would then persuade them to do webcam stuff, right?
TikTok.
Okay, but wait, it's called webcam stuff, right?
No, let's not call it that. The indictment is about TikTok.
Okay, what would you make the women do? What would they do with you?
I don't make anybody do anything.
Okay.
In fact, let's talk about the Loverboy method. So it's very interesting. Let's imagine...
Also, that was the same method I literally just described to you guys. The Loverboy method. I didn't know that was the name, but I literally described it to you guys.
The Matrix is pissed off with a said individual who's telling too much truth and everybody is listening to him, and they decide they're going to attack him with sexual assault claims. They say, he's making women we found conversations where he gave advice on how to go viral on TikTok. He's making women do TikTok, but he isn't being horrible to them. He's not hitting them. He's not being mean to them. So what can we do? Let's use the Loverboy method. If I was abusive and mean, they wouldn't say Loverboy method. You know what Loverboy method means? Being nice. He was nice and polite and kind, and they really liked him as a person, and he told them how to do TikTok.
But that's not what the
He's
Loverboy...
a Loverboy. Of course it is.
Andrew, that's not what the Loverboy method is.
Absolutely it is.
The Loverboy method is where perpetrators woo victims with the prospect of a loving relationship until they can be forced into abusive situations or a form of slavery. That's actually what it means.
The Loverboy method is being nice to people so that you work together, effectively what they're trying to say here. I was nice to girls who asked me for TikTok advice, and they sang it's the Loverboy method. I didn't beat them into doing TikTok. I didn't force them. I didn't threaten them. In fact, I was like, yeah, you're very pretty. You can be pretty famous.
Was there any element of coercion?
How can there be an element? What does that even mean? Let's be professionals here. What does that even mean?
What do you think coercion means?
I was coerced into this interview. You came along to me and said...
You weren't coerced into this interview.
Yes, I was.
Or don't tell me. The bullying
Piers.
MSM said, Andrew, you've got to do an interview.
No.
And I'm going to fly all the way to Romania to do it.
You didn't
me
do
a
that.
favour.
You used the Loverboy method. You said, sir...
The Loverboy method?
Yep. Andrew, this is going to be a very interesting interview. We had a good one last time. You're a nice guy. We have some interesting conversations.
I didn't say you were a nice
I'm going to
guy.
come along.
Wait a minute.
We're going to make some money from this interview.
Wait a
I didn't
minute.
say you were
Money will
nice.
be made for
Wait a
both
minute.
sides.
Wait a
you
minute.
Loverboyed me
Wait
and
a
you
minute.
stole the profit.
But just to be clear, I've had no conversation with you about this interview. And the conversations I've had with your intermediary were very professional. And I said, I would like to do an interview
Were
with
you nice?
I'm always nice.
Loverboyed. You can't believe you used niceness to loverboy me because this is a profitable enterprise and I was coerced here.
I make no pretense that I'm...
Okay, so what he's trying to do here, sorry, as you can see, I'm getting bored. He's trying to destroy the word Loverboy, make it into a totally different definition, so the impact of whatever, the impact of the truth that Piers is saying is less impactful.
I've come all the way from London to Romania to
Correct.
interview you because, yes, I want to do it on my show, and that will clearly benefit me and my show.
Am I a full-grown consenting adult who decided to do this show?
Yeah, but you're not being coerced into doing
Am
this.
I a full-grown consenting adult who decided to do this show?
Yes.
Okay, so I wasn't coerced, correct?
But what's that got to do with what I've asked you?
Because you were nice to me and you're saying that...
I wasn't
that's
nice to you. I didn't even talk to you.
Being nice is the Loverboy method and that
Andrew,
adults have no
Andrew,
personal responsibility and
I
that
wasn't
if you're
nice
nice to someone, they become your slave.
I wasn't nice to you and I didn't call you a nice guy.
I feel Loverboyed. I feel Loverboyed.
Do you?
Piers. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry.
It's fine.
You had a website, Hustlers University, offering courses teaching husbands and boyfriends how to get their partners into
Absolutely
webcam.
false. The Hustlers University, which you can go to now, actually, we've changed the domain, it's university.com, is a school which teaches modern wealth creation methods. We teach people how to make websites, we teach people e-com.
Why did you call it a PhD pimping hose degree?
No, you're talking about an old video which was made satirically.
Why did you call it that? Oh, that was satire.
Of course it was.
It wasn't.
9 years ago, the internet was a very different place. And if you're going to sit here and say, oh, 9 years ago, you said stupid things on the internet, it's not a gotcha moment because every single person has. So have you.
No, but you'd be very...
So have you because you advocated for the vaccine, sir. So
yeah,
you said
absolutely.
stupid things on the internet. Right? That's how things go. It's satirical. I also said I'm an astronaut. Do you believe I've been to the moon? Because I haven't, believe it or not. Hustlers University teaches children how to make websites, and it's
There's only one reason
and
I'm
it's
asking you.
fitness advice.
Only reason I'm asking you. You've repeatedly said in interviews since you were arrested that you have never categorized yourself as a pimp. You don't think you're a pimp, right?
Well, what about all the rappers? Did you ask Ice Cube if he's a pimp and a murderer and a drug dealer?
I'm not
Jay-Z sold crack.
I'm not
We're sitting here
interviewing.
talking.
I'm not interviewing them. I'm asking you whether you have at any stage in the last 15 years been a pimp.
Of course, I've not been a pimp. I've said I'm a pimp. I've said I'm an astronaut. I've said I'm a cowboy. I've said I'm the strongest man in the world. I've said I'm James Bond. Throw me in jail.
Are you just
Put me in jail.
okay?
Put me in jail. This guy is trying to, I see what he's trying to do. He's trying to denounce everything he's done. That's why he denounced the red pill. That's why he's denouncing his words. He's trying to denounce everything he's done, I guess, to make life easier for him in court. That's what it is, right? He has to be. He's literally going to say that everything I've said, you can't take me seriously. He's saying that openly.
Okay.
I deserve it. 9 years ago, I made a joke on the internet.
So here's my question: Are you a fantasist?
I'm not a fantasist.
Do you have a persona that's just not you?
Of course not. I am me.
Well, if you are you, why would you repeatedly call yourself a pimp and then now say you've never been a pimp?
Are you going to sit here and say that because I've once said, oh,
I'm curious whether if you're trying to say to me you didn't mean any of the things you said. So I'm asking myself, well, why should I believe anything you say now? In other words, is what you say actually what you mean? Is Andrew Tate real? Or do you have a complete persona that you've fueled for money that has nothing to do with the real you? I don't know. You tell me.
I exaggerated on the internet 9 years ago for comedic effect. I'd walk into a nightclub and there'd be girls at my table, like every other man who walks into a nightclub, and I'd say, pimpin'. Oh no, put me in jail. 93 days was not enough with the cockroaches. I should go back. This is a matrix attack, Piers. Every single person, every single man out there has done things worse than I've done. In fact, I will argue, if you put 99.9% of men through the level of scrutiny I've been through by multiple federal agencies, you will find a lot worse than him saying he was a pimp on the internet 9 years ago. You will find actual genuine crime. And I've done nothing. I live true to God. This is all garbage and it's not real.
Like I said to you, I don't know if you're guilty or not.
I do,
Okay.
and I am not guilty.
No, but
It's a matrix attack.
I want to be clear to you, I'm not preempting your guilt. I've come here with a completely open mind. You've been charged with serious offences, but I am not going to judge you because I'm not a judge and this is not a courtroom, right? And you've always said, I'm not a misogynist. And then the last time I interviewed you, you said, well, I may have said some things that, may have been misconstrued. But even in the last week, you've tweeted some stuff which I'm not even sure if you're aware as you tweet this stuff, how it sounds.
Read it.
Okay, let's read. This is quite a long one.
Sure.
But I think it's important to read it to get a sense of how you view women.
Absolutely.
Any woman I date does not have a job. Okay, so the woman you're with doesn't have a job.
No.
Okay. Do you date other women?
Sometimes.
And your partner's fine with that?
Obviously.
Yeah? And you're fine with that?
Why wouldn't I be?
Well, you think it's fine to be dating other women when you have a mother
I
of
think
your
we're
kids?
consenting adults and everybody can make their own personal
Okay,
decisions.
fair enough. Why would I be working so hard, you say, to have hundreds of millions for my woman to waste her life in slaved pennies? No, I will give you a life you can never ever afford. Private jets, 5-star hotels, new cars, endless spending money and diamonds. You will be rich because you're praying for me every day and protecting my spirit. I work in the physical world, she works in the spirit realm. Women shouldn't have to work because being a good partner is a full-time job for a woman. She has to look good. All the beauty treatments are time intensive. Not about money, it takes a lot of time. She has to train every day and stay in fantastic shape. Shop to look amazing next to me. I know there are some men who do 100 times more than this on a daily basis, but women are not as organized as men, and achieving anything significant causes them huge amounts of stress.
Yeah.
They need to have huge sections of their day empty to waste, or they will have a mental breakdown.
True.
And do you want a woman who's stressed and angry after the commute, unshaven and exhausted? Or do you want a Barbie doll who's always smiling and saying thank you because she did her nails and bought you Prada that day? As a man, unless you're a loser, you're already filthy rich, right? You can get endless sex anyway. Girls are easy. So what can a girl give you? Happiness, vibes, always smiling. Take the edge off a stressful life. Can she always be happy if she's been working all day? No. Just to wake up at 11, gym till 1, one appointment and some shopping. Dress beautiful by 7 p.m. for you to finish working and tell you how strong you are. No matter how pissed off you are, just to always be laughing and smiling and writing little notes about how you're perfect. And just to be playful and funny. She can't do that if she has a job. So your job is being my girlfriend and now you're a millionaire. Congratulations. Behave and aim for the promotion to wife. The reason I read all that in detail was I don't think you understand quite how that comes over, because I think that is the purest definition of misogyny I've probably ever read.
Well, I don't think you understand. One, especially when I'm talking about the fact that women can't handle what men can do, etc. One, it's slightly sarcastic. There's a sarcastic.
Oh, here
Do
we
you
go.
mean any of this?
I mean all of it. Any woman I'm with, I will provide for because I
No
want to
woman
protect
should
her.
work. They should spend all day beautifying themselves for you, right? And they might get promoted to
is-
wife.
this is
Your
my
job is being my girlfriend.
Correct.
There are hundreds of millions of women around the world who do a good day's work who still manage to be a very good wife or partner. Right?
Agreed. Completely. But it's my
So
life.
why would you encourage a whole generation of young men? I mean, I've got to be honest, since our last 2 interviews, before you were arrested, I would say every single day I have young men, teenage boys, maybe early 20s, coming up to me asking about you. It's gone on every day since I interviewed you. I'm very aware of your reach. I'm very aware of your influence. And whenever I've been asked about you, they say, what do you think of him? I said, I don't really know. I find myself agreeing with 60 to 70% of the things you say. And I do, because I think a lot of the stuff you say about empowering young men to be confident, to work out, to take care of themselves.
to have enough money to not force their woman to work.
Right, but that's the bit. That's the bit where when you stray into that kind of language, particularly in the detail where you reveal what you're really thinking, the kind of pathetic, soulless life you want for these women. Where does it allow for being a mother, for example?
Absolutely, that's
How does a mother of your children manage to find time for being a mother in this routine of love and devotion to you?
How does having a job give her time to be a mother? This gives her all the time in the world to be a mother. One, it's slightly sarcastic, firstly.
What do you mean?
Well,
Do
you
mean
can tell
don't-
by the tone.
Do you mean you don't mean it?
No, I mean it.
Well, which
but
bit?
it's slightly sarcastic.
Well, sarcasm
for
means
comedic effect.
sarcasm means you don't mean it.
No, I mean it. But it's slightly
Well, you
sarcastic.
either mean it or you don't. It's either sarcastic or it's not.
I mean every single word.
But this is the
but it's
conundrum with you,
slightly
Andrew.
sarcastic, sarcastic.
This is the conundrum with you.
The shirt change because I fell asleep. But we're going to watch the video. We're going to continue watching the video. This is part 2. Thankfully, I fell asleep at the right time. And this time, I guess we're going to get Andrew's thoughts on Palestine and Israel war. At least that's from the title. So I think we're finally done talking about Andrew. God, just lies on lies, bro.
Between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. What is your view of this war?
I think when you call it a war, you're doing a disservice to the people who are having their limbs blown off by some of the most advanced technical weaponry on the planet. It is a genocide and it is disgusting. And it doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum you fall on. When you observe a genocide in front of your very eyes, you should be disgusted.
Which side is waging genocide?
The Israelis are genociding the Palestinians, and you know it as well as everybody else does. Well, then it seems like your bosses are not allowing you to know it.
What do you think of what Hamas did in October?
Now, I will say, look, I want to get the definition of the word genocide and then make my opinion on whether this is a genocide or not. Now, genocide is the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. Yeah, no, that's... Israel is committing it. I agree. Israel is committing a genocide. It is technically considered a war, fair, but a war has to be fair on both sides. And even though what Hamas has done and is doing, I can't condone Israel and like all of the stuff they've done. Like I've read some how they were very into biological warfare, and when you hear about some of the stuff they've created just to commit killings, it breaks your heart. So I actually agree with Andrew on this part. Yeah, it feels like a genocide. It most likely is a genocide.
October the 7th.
Why are you starting the story in the middle,
I
Piers?
didn't. I just asked you about the wider war. I'm now asking you specifically about Hamas.
I cannot professionally answer that question without talking about the context that led up to October 7th.
Well, nothing, to my mind, justifies what happened on October the 7th.
Nothing justifies what happened before October the 7th, Piers. This is the exact point. So you're talking to a man, I don't know what answer you expect from me, because let's forget the fact that I'm a Muslim. You're talking to a man who is fighting oppression to the best of his ability because he believes that the people in charge of the world are enslaving us all, to the point where I detriment my own life. I end up in a jail cell because I'm speaking against oppression. Then you're asking me what I would do if my family was blown to pieces.
You're not in a jail. Hang on.
You're asking me what I would do if another government came along and blew my family to pieces?
You weren't put in a jail cell because of any oppression.
Absolutely I was.
No, you weren't.
Of course
you
I
were
was.
put in jail cell because you've been accused of serious sexual crimes.
I would not have been accused if I was not monumentally successful in speaking the truth.
Let me ask you again. It's a simple question. Some people can answer it straight away, including pro-Palestinians people I've had on my program. Many are very quick to say absolutely. Do you believe Hamas are a terror organization?
And that's a very interesting...
And that's a very interesting question. No, I would not say they are a terrorist organization. I would say that they are.
Question, but I think you're peddling asininities.
Well, just answer the question.
Can somebody do me a favor? Google asininities and find out if it's a word.
I know what it means.
If it's not, make sure it's added to Webster on Top G's orders.
Okay. Just, are they a terror group?
You're peddling asininities because I'll tell you why, Piers. Let me answer the question.
No, I'm not.
Of course you are.
It's a simple question.
That's like me asking...
I'll tell you why I asked. Because the UK, where you were born, prescribes Hamas as a terror
They
organization.
also prescribe me as dangerous to children in schools. Let me explain something to you, Piers.
You're not prescribed as that.
If I were to sit here and say, is stealing wrong? And you'd say yes, and I go, but what if the person stealing is trying to feed their family, and if they don't, their family are going to die? Is it still wrong? You're trying to take a very nuanced and complicated argument and reduce it down to one sentence, which is failure.
You're trying to equate stealing with a mob of terrorists breaking over a border, going to peaceful...
Is that what Israel did?
Wait a minute.
A mob of terrorists breaking over a border and killing people. Is that what Israel did?
Going through a border on October the 7th.
Oh, October the 7th.
Massacring young people at a festival, massacring families in their homes in a kibbutz, setting fire to them, cutting their heads off, killing babies.
Oh, killing 40 babies, that was true.
Well, fine.
Were the babies vaccinated?
Why are you being flippant?
I'm not being flippant. The point I am making...
I don't find that funny.
No, but the point I am making is that the media lies, firstly.
No,
secondly...
I can ask you about different things at the same time, right?
Sure.
So I'm asking you, first of all, specifically, what is your reaction to what happened on October the 7th?
Sure. I'll answer the question professionally. I do not condone the loss of human life on either side. I think anybody doing anything which directly damages civilians is disgusting and abhorrent. However, I would be an amateur if I could not sit and pretend I do not understand the motivations behind either side. This is not even me taking a side. I understand why Israel is doing what it's doing. I understand why Palestine is doing what it is doing. However, I still call the Israeli actions absolutely abhorrent and genocidal.
Okay, we're going to come to Israel's actions.
Okay, so ignoring literally everything that he said about him, this is not a bad statement. I actually agree with the statement. Yeah, both sides, you can condemn both sides and still choose a side. You can condemn both sides and choose no side. You can condemn both sides and I guess somehow want peace for both sides. You want both sides to win, which will never happen, it seems. But you can do that. You can do all of that. So for me personally, I condemn both sides and the loss of innocent lives, the needless loss of innocent lives. And in terms of a side, I don't think I can choose one. I've seen the history. I've read the history, and even in my shallow understanding, it's deep. Easy for me to choose a side when it comes to figuring out the origin. Who's the aggressor? Who started things first, right? And then from there, trying to see, okay, is it the environment that's shifted the views of the person? Is it because of certain factors that influence the person to do so, right? And then I really, because everything is subjective, I really make my decision and analysis after that. But with this Hamas and with just the context of the whole war in general, no, I don't have a side. But I can say that based off of the technology, the way I see people, like when you compare the people in Israel, how they're living versus the people in Palestine, the people in Palestine are in consistent fear of their lives. And I think a decent majority of the people in Israel aren't that worried. You know, it's like if we had a war happening in California, the west side would be very, you know? But the east side, I think things would still kind of go on as usual. Don't get me wrong, the war stuff would happen, for sure. But there would still be people going to the beach, you know? That's what I'm saying. So I don't disagree with Andrew here. And it feels like a genocide based off of like the technological advances and the kind of warfare they've committed.
Promise you, we will ask that question specifically. But in terms of what Hamas did on October the 7th, do you accept that was an act of terrorism?
It's an interesting question because
it's not really.
It is.
It's a very straightforward question.
Because you're the person who would have called Nelson Mandela a terrorist while he was still in jail, and one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter.
I wouldn't have
For me
called
to
him
answer
that.
the question, yes, you would have. For me to answer the question, I have to be very professional.
He literally is telling you he's not. Don't come on. I know Piers has a reputation, but I respect Piers. He will talk to anybody. I don't know how biased or unneutral he is or isn't, but he will talk to anybody, all sides. You gotta respect him for that.
Professional Piers. For me to sit on the outside in Romania with no personal involvement in Israel-Palestine, it's easy for me to say, yes, it was an act of terror. However, if I was in Gaza, if I was in an open-air prison, if my family had been annihilated by bombs from the sky, if everybody I knew had suffered the loss of a loved one, if I had no chance of any kind of freedom or democracy or standard of life, would I believe it was an act of terror, or would I believe it's an act of resistance against oppression? You have to be very careful how you answer these questions.
So what do you think?
See, look, another fair statement. I think you have to be careful depending on your situation. Yes, the people that are living in Palestine are going to consider Hamas freedom fighters, and they have every right to do so. Now, just because they are freedom fighters, it doesn't mean they're not committing acts of terrorism. Both things can be true. They can be doing the good fight, fighting the good fight, and still, you know, doing what many would consider acts of terrorism. It's like when they were talking about, when Andrew was talking about how he couldn't answer the question because of the way that Piers was phrasing it, when he was asking about October the 7th. And then Andrew was making that analysis about how if you steal from your family, you'd be considered good, but if you steal for yourself, you'd be considered bad. That was a good point, and I want to extrapolate. I want to extrapolate on that point. I learned something in psychology where there was something about how some people will follow the rules, some people look at the rules in a subjective approach where it's like sometimes you have to use them, sometimes you don't, and then there's some people who just don't follow the rules. And the psychology of it is, how do you choose when or when not to follow the rules? And ultimately, the way I understood that segment, you have to be ready to accept the consequences no matter what they are. And as long as you're ready to accept said consequences, do whatever, do anything. But as an individualist, if you harm anybody in the process of this, You're worse than scum.
I think I understand what happens when you take people and put them in such an inhumane condition. For anybody to sit and say that you're going to take people and put them in absolutely inhumane conditions and give them no standard of life, and they're not allowed to ever fight back, or they are terrorists.
But I can agree with you.
Anyone who does that is an amateur.
I can agree with you that the plight of the Palestinians for many decades has been absolutely shameful.
So what did we think was going to happen, Piers?
No, nothing justifies what happened on October the 7th.
So what are they
nothing,
supposed to do?
Nothing.
So what are they supposed to do?
That was an act of medieval barbaric terrorism. Nothing justifies it.
Did they suffer acts of medieval?
Your attempt to try and equivocate.
Did they suffer acts of medieval barbaric terrorism before that date? Yes. And it's unfortunately an eye for an eye in this world.
Tell me,
I'm not condoning. I'm being a professional and answering to you why it happened.
Give me one example of where Israel, without any provocation, went into, a specific question, went into Gaza and massacred 1,500 innocent people, cutting their heads off, taping and boasting about what they'd done back to their families in Israel, kidnapping Holocaust survivors, bringing them, they wouldn't have, of course, done that in their case, kidnapping old grandmothers and bringing them back to Israel, kidnapping babies, kidnapping children. When has Israel actually gone in and done something of the scale of October the 7th?
There's literally endless examples of that.
Give me one.
In
2014,
they were bombing civilians.
You know
what, Piers, let me tell you something.
I'm not talking about what they would categorize as retaliation for rocket strikes, and there's an arguable point. As there is, for example, I'm vehemently against the expansion of the settlements on the West Bank. I think there are legitimate questions about the proportionality of Israel's response here.
Yeah,
but in terms of what Hamas perpetrated on October the 7th, there is no instance of Israel doing that to the people of Gaza. And you have to accept that. If you don't accept that, you're either deluded or you're deliberately not wanting to say the obvious, which is that was an act of terrorism, because you're concerned about upsetting people in Palestine. Is that the case?
Let me go back to
That's what it feels like. It does feel like that's the case. I will agree with Piers that a lot of Israel's reactions, from what I remember, were reactionary. But I'm pretty sure there are some incidences where Israel has actually gone into the Gaza Strip and committed acts of terrorism themselves. I'm not saying Israel is faultless at all. Please understand me. I know the IDF have committed atrocious crime. I just don't have the memory of said knowledgeable events, but I'm aware of it. So it's crazy. But this second part, Andrew's really showing him stuff.
My first point when I said you're peddling asininities. The reason I said that is because to look at a situation, no matter how heinous, and to ignore all of the context and pretend that you do not understand why said situation happened
Nothing justifies terrorism on that scale. Nothing.
Is asinine.
No, it's not.
Because it's not about justification.
Let me tell you why.
Piers, it's not about justification.
Let me tell you,
it's about understanding the realities of the world.
Let me tell you the realities of the world. Hamas came to power in 2005. Hamas's initial founding charter made it clear that they are for the eradication of Israel. And on October the 7th, they proved what that means is they will kill every Jew they can get their hands on. They are an existential threat to people in Israel and to Jewish people. And that is, I'm afraid, the purest personification of a terror group. I also think by doing what they did, as they have done since 2005, they weren't representing innocent Palestinian people in Gaza.
Who are suffering now.
They knew, yes, but Hamas knew when they did what they did that Israel would respond the way they did and that thousands of innocent Palestinians would get killed. They knew that and they still did it. So my question for you is, why can't you, which is my position on this, is very straightforward. What Hamas did was an act of terror, an absolutely despicable act of terror, and should be called exactly what it is. And they are now demonstrably a terrorist group. That is why they were rightly prescribed that by the UK and America and other countries. And to try and pretend they're not makes you sound like Jeremy Corbyn. And I can't think of a worse insult to throw at you, right? So
I don't think me and Corbyn agree on that.
But I also think there are legitimate questions to come about the way Israel's responded. We can come to that. But I just want to ask you one more time. Is what Hamas did on October the 7th an act of terrorism?
I think, Piers, it is peddling asininities for you to pretend that enslaving people...
So you sound like Jeremy Corbyn now.
No, let me answer the question.
15 times he refused to answer the question.
Let me answer the question.
You're now up
I'm
to
not
about...
refusing.
You're now about 3 or 4.
If you look...
Are they a terror group or not?
They're one team's freedom fighter, and they're deemed a terrorist
What do
group.
you think?
I think that if you lock people in an open-air prison and steal their land, they're going to retaliate.
So they're not a terror group?
I think they're going to retaliate.
They're not a terror group?
Okay, see, I don't know why he can't answer the question. I think he really doesn't want to look bad in front of his supporters, I guess. It must be that. Can't you say that? Yeah. Look, I I get people don't like the certain connotations that words bring, but the truth is the truth. Can't both things be true? Can't they be freedom fighters to some and terrorists to others? If you think they're freedom fighters, just say that. Just say that. If you think they're terrorists, just say that. Be honest. In certain situations like this, you can't be on the fence. You can understand. Please, you can always understand both sides, but you gotta choose one. It's either you condemn them for killing children, or you support it and you have those children be part of your cause. Like it's both ways. You either have to be inhumane to everyone else but your side, or humane to everybody.
One team's terrorist is another
Okay, we're
team's
now up
freedom
to
fighter.
about 8. Are they a terror group?
And also, another thing I want to make clear to you, Piers.
Only Jeremy Corbyn has done this.
Done what?
Refused to answer the question.
I think that what they are doing is seemingly deemed an act of terror by the people that the terror...
Don't use weaselly words.
They're not weaselly.
Very
Of course
weaselly.
the Israelis think they're a terror.
Very Weasley, very Weasley. He's just asking, how do you, Mr. Andrew Tate, top G, feel? Simple question.
Group, and of course the Palestinians think
Actually,
they're freedom fighters.
most
It's
of the-
stupid that you're asking the question.
Most
because
of the
it's clear.
civilized world thinks they're a terror group who committed an act of terrorism. It's not difficult. What they did was an act of terrorism.
And I think that if Israel continues to
gonna
conduct
come to-
acts of
I'm
terrorism
going to come-
on the Palestinian people, they're going to do nothing
I'm
but
gonna
strengthen the reaction.
well, that's a different conversation I'm about to have with you about Israel's response. But before I get there, one more time, is Hamas a terror group who committed an act of terrorism?
I think that when you lock people in an open air prison, you're going to have
Okay,
to
you're not
expect
gonna
a
answer.
retaliation.
You're not
No,
gonna
because
answer.
I have to. There's people who are. First things I want to say, Piers.
If you don't mind me saying, I think it's spineless.
Sure.
Yep.
I do.
That's fine.
You
Yep,
sound like
agreed.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, that is an
Did you
insult.
see my interview with him?
No.
Right, 15 times last week, I asked him the same question. 15 times he prevaricated and wouldn't answer. Eventually, when someone does that enough times, you know what they really think.
Okay.
You don't think they're a terror group.
Well, let me answer.
You don't
without
think
being
they're a terror
interrupted.
group.
No, what I think is this. On certain
Because I'd be
scenarios,
really curious what you think an act of terror is if it's not massacring 1,500 innocent people,
It's not
including Holocaust survivors,
Piers.
kidnapping babies,
Piers.
decapitating
Piers.
people, cutting their limbs
Piers.
off, raping women.
Yeah, talk about missing limbs. We're going to talk about that when we talk about what
We
Israel has
are,
done.
but
So
when we
let's-
get there, it'll be in the context of you not admitting that was an act of terror.
Well, let me answer the question for the final time.
Oof.
I am a.
Because because look, if he doesn't, right, that anything he says about Israel, if there's any correlation between what they did October 7th and what Israel has done in his past time, he loses the argument. He loses his position, and if anything, he looks worse than I think he did before. You have to, if you want to make the terrorist argument to anyone else, you have to first have a solid definition of it. And I think that's a solid definition of it. You can still call Hamas freedom fighters and condemn them as a group that has made an act of terror. You could even have to call them a terrorist group. You can still just call it an act of terrorism. I think you can, but they can't. So that's the issue here.
realist. And as a realist, sometimes you do not come to the conclusion of labeling good guys and bad guys. The world is not black and white.
Hamas are bad guys.
No, the world is not black and white. The world is actually very gray. Anybody who sits and thinks there's clearly
Nothing
a
gray
good
about
guy,
what- there's
and
nothing
clearly
gray
a
about
good
what
guy
Hamas
and
did.
clearly a bad guy does
See,
not.
it's the connotation. That's what I'm saying. Like, I want to do a video on this, on negative connotation, or really just connotation in general. It's the negative connotation that comes with being considered a terrorist, being like an act of terror. It's that connotation that is making people afraid of committing the truth. And I get it. I understand. You know, when you really have to put your foot down and like be 10 toes down about what you want to say, it's a scary thing, because then you have to commit, and commitment's scary. So I understand all of this, but certain things you just gotta say what they are. You just have to.
Not understand how the world works. And as a realist, what you do is you look at scenarios and you understand why they happen, how unfortunate they are, how unfortunate the loss of human life is, how civilians die on both sides, how innocents are dying in a chess game played by the elites on both sides. Both sides, you have innocent people who didn't even vote for the person making the decisions, who are ensuring their death, signing their death warrants. It's unfortunate on both sides. But listen, sir, you would not advocate Russia doing any of the things to Ukraine that Israel is doing to to Palestine. You would not sit here.
Russia has been doing exactly that.
Russia
to
has
Ukraine.
not done a fraction of the things to Ukraine that Israel has done to Palestine.
Russia illegally invaded a sovereign democratic country and has committed a barbaric rampage, trying to seize as much of Ukraine as it can, bombing maternity hospitals, killing innocent women and children.
Let me ask you a question.
Right? Don't even try and have some kind of
No, this is genuine
equivocation of this.
I will. A Hamas rocket, a tiny Hamas rocket that can make a pothole in the road, and then they get hit back with cruise missiles. Let me ask you a question. Ukraine sent a drone and hit the Kremlin.
If they're sending missiles, it's not going to make just a pothole in the road. Don't downplay what they did in order to upplay the atrocities of Israel. I think that's unfair. You don't need to lessen the effects of retaliation, if you say that's what it is, from Hamas, because Israel has done so many terrible things. Like, come on, misinformation is not going to work here.
A drone attack, it did nothing, it damaged some shingles. If Russia decided to then respond with a missile attack on a hospital and annihilate 800 people,
it has been.
Do you think that would be allowed?
That's exactly what it has been.
Would you advocate for that?
Have you seen?
Would you support that
Have
reaction?
you seen the state of Mariupol, which they leveled to the ground?
The Ukrainians did level it,
The
you're
Russian,
correct.
No, the Russians
2014.
The Russians leveled Mariupol.
And my question to you is, would you advocate those reactions? Let me ask you another question, Piers. This is a genuine question. Let me ask you a question, because I want to understand your point of view.
It's actually my interview of you.
Yeah, but you tried to understand mine. I just want to understand your point of view. If I believed, or if Israel believed, that one of the people in your house was a terrorist and decided to destroy your entire house and kill your entire family, would you sit and say, well, maybe there was a terrorist inside, I accept that? Or would you be enraged? Genuine question.
I don't think you can take an individual person's response.
Well, it's a bunch of individual people in Gaza. They're people, individuals with thoughts and dreams and aspirations which are being annihilated. 15-year-old girls without legs because of cruise missiles.
Let's come to
they
that.
are individual people. They're not cattle, Piers.
Let's come to
They're
that.
people.
Right, and so were the people in Israel on October the 7th.
And that's why it's so heinous, which is my exact point.
But not heinous enough to reach your bar of terrorism.
It's not about reaching bar of terrorism. It's understanding why things happen.
Piers is making the better points though. Because because the thing is, what Piers has to do to win this argument is overlap what Andrew actually believes terrorism is, compare it to October 7th, find the obvious correlations, and then boom. Andrew's argument's dismantled. But while I do understand Andrew's argument, I'm a broken record at this point. I'm not going to say it again, but you have to choose a side at this point. You can multiple things can be true at the same time.
By not saying it, you've made your position clear, just as Jeremy Corbyn did. And to pretend you're any different is ridiculous. Let's move on to Israel's response, because there are legitimate questions about this. Hamas embeds itself, 40,000 terrorists in my estimation, you can call them whatever you like. And they're embedded amongst the civilian population, predominantly in northern Gaza. We know from intelligence over the last 20 years, which you won't believe because the Matrix has made it all up.
Correct.
But we know from intelligence that historically Hamas likes to embed itself, particularly around things like schools and hospitals and mosques, because that makes it more difficult if the Israelis attack.
Yeah.
Now, Israel has killed nearly 12,000 people in its response, right? There are many people around the world demanding a ceasefire who think that is a ridiculously disproportionate response to what happened. Well, it was genocide. They would want to kill everyone in Palestine. They don't.
They just want to drive them all out.
Whereas Hamas do want to kill every Jew. That is actually what genocide is.
You know what's actually interesting? Because you've spoken about this subject with people who actually understand the conflict better than I do. Mohammed Hijab understands it better. Low-key understands it better. I'm talking from a very general humanistic perspective because I don't understand the absolute intricacies like they do.
Do you know what genocide means?
And I am talking from an individualistic point of view. I think, I'm not gonna lie to you, this may be my cocky ego. I think my individualist manifesto is more humane than Andrew's humanitarian approach. Now, I mean, I'm using a lot of big words, and so I'm sorry, guys, but I don't know. I feel like I am more someone that's for humanity or humanity's sake than Andrew. If he can give the take that he can give, I don't think he's being a humanist. What's the definition of a humanist? Let's just get the definition real quick. A humanist, it stands for the building of a more humane, just, compassionate, and democratic society using a pragmatic ethics based on human reason, experience, and reliable knowledge. So I don't think he's building that. There's no compassion. He's literally saying that for the people that died, they died as a response to retaliation. The people in Israel, they died as retaliation. So it's unfortunate that they died, but because they were part of a system that was the most oppressive, like if you can tell me he has compassion there, then well, big yikes, huh?
Of course I do.
Right. Genocide means you want to eradicate an entire people based on race or ethnicity. Israel clearly doesn't want to do that to the Palestinian people.
Clearly not.
If it did, it wouldn't tell a million of them, as it turned out, who moved south. Now, there are arguments about whether
to attack them as they moved.
Well, some people got hit as they moved.
Oh, some people got hit.
Yes.
Some people got hit.
You know what,
You know
Andrew?
what happens?
You know what, Andrew?
Wait till it's your son, son.
You know what?
Wait till it's your son.
I agree. And you know what, Andrew? War is horrific. It's horrific. The question is it a just war for Israel to go after Hamas? And if it is, and you believe as I do, Hamas has to be got rid of, how do you do that? If you don't do it the way Israel is doing it, how do you get rid of that terror group? Now, you won't agree with anything they're doing because you can't even categorize them as a terror group.
No, the reason I won't agree with them is because I'm a human, Piers. And please let me answer this without being interrupted. You didn't answer my earlier question for a reason, because you knew that you couldn't answer it without proving my point. The question about the fact that if they decided to cruise missile your house because they thought somebody inside was a terrorist, you would not accept the loss of your family that you have raised. You would not accept that.
Of course I wouldn't.
Okay, absolutely. So let me answer this as a professional. What's funny is I'm a humanist. Like I said,
a professional what, by the way?
The professional.
What
Please
does
let
that
me
mean?
answer. Let me answer.
What are you? What are you thinking? You say you're thinking of professional,
and I'm talking about this from a humanistic perspective, right? And like I said, you've talked to people more knowledgeable than me on the details of the subject.
Right.
Listen to me very carefully. I thought we lived in a democratic society. You just said 35,000 Hamas terrorists, and this is the thing that's most upsetting to me. This is what genuinely upsets me. Israel intelligence will say a guy's a Hamas terrorist. Has that guy gone to a court of law? Has there been a democratic process? Has he been proven to be a terrorist? No. They've just decided from their intelligence that couldn't see an invasion coming from hundreds of miles away. So this intelligence is
actually no.
It's not great.
No.
So they've decided this person might be in intelligence without court case, without any kind of democratic process, and because of that, they've decided to annihilate civilians along with him, and it's all just collateral damage, and nobody should care. That is not a humanistic perspective, and that is disgusting. And any person in the West who is advocating for that is a hypocrite. And because if it was turned on them, if the American government said, "We think the person in your shopping mall, one of the people you were shopping alongside in the mall, might have committed a crime. We didn't take them to court. We think they might have, so we killed your whole family. Get over it."
So the last time
is a clown and a hypocrite.
So the last time,
what do you expect full-grown men to do?
I'm about to respond.
What do you expect full-grown men to do when you kill all of their families and leave them locked in an open-air prison?
Let me respond. The last time that...
Then look, let me respond. No one is saying it's not understandable. We don't live in the conditions they live. We have yet to experience what they've experienced. No one is saying it's not understandable. I want to quickly use a movie, one of my favorite movies, John Q, played by Denzel Washington. This man committed kidnapping. He was in a hostage situation to try to get demands for his son to get higher on the donor list. After spending all this time, he worked it the right way. He worked, he waited, he did everything he could to try to get his son on the list. But because there are people with more money than him that could literally buy their spot, he had to commit an act of terrorism. But in doing so, he was able to save his son. He accepted the consequences and he went to jail, but he saved his son's life by doing that. So with that being said, when it comes to what Andrew was making a reference about grown men who lose their families, what are they supposed to do? How would you expect them to respond or want to respond? 100% understandable. I don't think anyone is saying that they don't understand why they're doing what they're doing in response. If that is the context, if that is the case, it is still an act of terrorism. And it's because of the fear of the negative connotation that surrounds the words and any reaction deemed from it. Because of that negative connotation, there's just fear to say that. And I personally, I don't get it. Especially if you're aware of connotation. Just do what I'm doing. Say the words.
Face an existential threat was in World War II. And the Nazis, who wanted to take over the world and kill every Jewish person, The Nazis were ultimately defeated by Winston Churchill leading the Allies. And Winston Churchill, in the process of defeating the Nazis, killed a lot of German innocent civilians in the process. Do you think that was justified?
Let me ask a question.
Was it? Well, no, I asked the questions. Was it justified?
Sir, I believe, and let me just get this right in my head.
Oh no.
Yeah, think about it.
No, I don't need to think about your question. I believe that the Nazis, which were obviously heinous, I'm not advocating anything they did, it's disgusting, the Nazis. I'm glad we beat them. I'm actually a huge
Were they
Churchill
terrorists?
fan. Yeah, they were.
Right.
So I believe that they
So
were...
when you massacre Jewish people, you're terrorists.
When
Except you do it in Israel.
When you try and conduct genocide on a populace because you don't want them on land you say is yours, then you are terrorists.
It's exactly what Hamas did on October
Exactly
the 7th.
what Israel had did before that.
So
That's
you
fine.
literally just described what Hamas do.
Got him.
You just described...
You see, he got him. He got him. He got him. That's what I'm saying. This is what Piers had to do. That's why I love Piers, bro. Come on. You can't tell me that wasn't good. You just can't. Yes, they're both doing acts of terrorism. It's that simple.
Describe what Israel do. They're trying to genocide the Palestinians as we speak. And this is the exact point.
So,
to sit here,
Israel...
No, but to sit here...
Hang on, so you think Israel are terrorists?
I think that what they're doing now is disproportionate and genocidal.
Is it terrorism?
It's genocidal, so I guess that makes it terrorism. It's
Right,
genocidal.
so they're terrorists for responding
there you
to
go.
an act of
An
terror,
answer.
but the people who committed the act of terror are not terrorists.
The way in which they're responding...
You see
is
the
not
problem in that
proportionate.
argument?
No. I
Really?
don't. Yes, what they are doing now...
Slaughtering 1,500 people in the way they did it is not an act of terror by terrorists, but a response from the people who are on the receiving end, rather like the response from
Didn't
the
you say
Allies
12 did you say
in World War
12,000
II
people?
to what the Nazis did. That apparently is the only act of terrorism.
Didn't you say 12,000 people the Israelis have killed thus far?
Yes.
I saw a video of a 15-year-old girl with no legs begging to die.
Yeah.
She was begging to die saying, I have no future because my parents are gone or my legs are gone.
It's
I have no
horrific.
future. No, but you say that,
That's
right?
so
you
horrific.
talk about numbers and statistics and you say a few people got caught. You don't think of Gazans and you don't think of as Muslims and Palestinians as individual people.
Oh, yes, I do.
No, you don't. Because
Oh,
if you
I do.
did, if you
Oh, I
did,
do.
if you did, you
Oh,
would
no,
not be happy with what's
don't you
happening
dare
here.
say that about me.
Well, okay, then don't group them together in numbers.
No,
They're
I've
not numbers,
I've
they're people.
spoken for many years about the plight of the Palestinian people. I think it's outrageous that Israel has any control over their ability to function with water, with fuel, with other energy, and so on, and
Okay,
food and so on.
that's interesting.
It is
So
wrong.
if you were in Gaza as a Gazan male of masculine fighting age and you believed the things you currently believe,
Yeah.
what would you do about it? I'm just asking.
You know what? Nothing justifies the terrorism we
I
saw
never
on
said
October
you'd
the
be a
7th.
terrorist. I'm asking what you do.
No. I understand why people in Palestine feel oppressed. I understand why they want freedom. I understand why they want the same rights as the people in Israel.
Then here's a perfect...
On
then
that,
here's the-
on that
okay,
we agree.
Absolutely,
but nothing,
we agree.
But nothing justifies what happened on October
Well,
the 7th.
here's where we disagree, Piers, because as a professional, when we both agree on the point that the people inside of Gaza are being oppressed and that their life is being detrimented and that they have no way of getting out,
Yes.
we, as a professional...
And I do agree with that.
I understand pressure cookers explode. You're pretending they shouldn't. You're saying that they should never explode. Nothing bad should ever happen.
saying nothing justifies terrorism.
We should just be allowed to subjugate them
No,
for
no.
endless years
Here's
and
my-
nothing happens.
No.
And I'm a real...
No, I interrupted a good rant part, but I wanted to say, when people, I like to assume this, when people join a terrorist group, it's because they have a certain person they want to get rid of. I think for Hamas, it was Netanyahu, right? That's what I like to believe. It's they have a certain group that they want to focus, a group that's most likely responsible for all the oppression, and they're focusing on that singular group. To me, that's what I like to think when I think that people join these kind of groups, these terror groups. The issue is how they commit their acts, and October 7th is the biggest one, but there's very similar acts to it, and when that happens, the original message that I believe that the groups had becomes very lost. Now it's just, all right, well, we failed. Now we just have to destroy everybody. Like, I don't like that.
Realist to understand that pressure cookers explode.
No, you're not.
And that's what
No,
happened.
you're not.
We need a solution to the problem, or it
Actually,
will continue to happen.
You're not a realist because actually you are not accepting that what they did on October the 7th was an act of terrorism by terrorists. You won't accept that. You think actually they're freedom fighters doing some kind of resistance. And I say that is ridiculous and shameful. That's the difference.
Now, see, you don't have to. I kind of disagree with Piers on this point. You don't have to say if they're freedom fighters or terrorists. That is perfectly up to your description. You can say if these freedom fighters committed an act of terror, and then vice versa, right? But I think it's clear that it's an act of terrorism. I think that's the one definition that should be like solidified. What they are, who they are, whatever, up to grabs, depends on where you are, who you are. But the acts, come on. By definition, that's what it is.
Difference between us.
I understand that pressure cookers explode, Piers.
Right. So you think it's perfectly reasonable what happened there?
I don't think it's reasonable. I think it's a shame.
Natural consequence.
I think it's a shame.
That's what he's saying. Nope, that's like perfect words. Andrew is saying it's the natural consequences of things. That's it. That's literally what he's saying.
A shame. That's it.
I think it's a shame that we're living in the world now where people are reduced to basically suicide, to try and fight for freedom for their families if they have one left, because they all committed suicide. Those men who did that.
Well, the
Because
Hamas-
they didn't have a chance of survival. I think when you
Well, that's because they believe that they're martyring themselves and going to a better
when
life.
you oppress people to the point where their family's dead and they have nothing to live for. And I think that's a shame.
So do you support Islamic fundamentalism?
Absolutely not.
Do you support an Islamist ideology?
Absolutely not.
Right.
What I support.
So why do you support Hamas?
I support justice in the
Do you
universe.
support Hamas?
I support justice in the universe.
Do you
Piers.
support Hamas?
No.
You don't?
Well, I don't know the ins and outs of Hamas's creed. I have to be very honest.
Well, you know what they did on October the 7th. Do you support them?
I understand why that happened, and I'm
Right.
saying it's a shame.
But you won't denounce
Uh-oh.
I say it's a shame.
I think the realest moment he said was when he said, no, he does not support Hamas. And then he turned fake when he like switched it up again. But you wanted the realest moment? I think that was the realest moment.
Will you condemn them?
I can't sit here and condemn the obvious outcome of consequence.
Really?
How can I condemn?
You can't condemn Hamas for what they did.
Well, we know what's going to happen, and we need a solution.
You're
here.
very quick to condemn Israel's response, but you won't condemn the terror attack which prompted it.
No, I'll tell you why.
Even though Hamas knew by doing what they were doing, that would be the response.
Do you think they knew that?
Of course they knew that.
You think
Of course
they knew
they
the
knew.
Israelis?
They did it quite deliberately. You know why? Because they were funded and supported by Iran. They didn't like the fact that Israel was normalizing relations with a bunch of Arab countries, from the UAE to Bahrain to Morocco, and then coming down the line was going to be Saudi Arabia. That was a threat to the Iran view of what should be happening in that region. Iran are the ones who support and fund and arm Hamas, and they clearly, in my estimation, it hasn't been probably established yet, but clearly Hamas couldn't have done this on their own. They've done it with support from Iran, and they've gone and committed an act of such heinous atrocity that they knew what the response would be, and that means that they sentenced in that moment not just 1,500 people in Israel to death in the most appalling manner possible, but they also sentenced to death thousands and thousands of innocent Palestinians, including many innocent children, because half the population are children, and Hamas knew that was what was going to happen. So my question is, how can anyone think that Hamas is a force for good for the Palestinian people?
Good.
They are a force
I said they're
for evil.
unfortunate. No, I didn't say they're a force for good. I said it's a pressure cooker and it's a shame.
But you won't even condemn them.
Let me ask the question. Do you think if we gave the Palestinian people basic human rights, that Hamas would find it more difficult to recruit new soldiers?
I think
Probably.
Yeah. No, he's right. Agreed. I agree. I do think that Israel conditions are I was talking about back then, but I don't know much. I do think because of what Israel did, Hamas is the consequence of Israel's very terrible decisions when it came to handling the people of Palestine. That is facts. But everything else is still true as well.
Probably if we treat them like
I
humans,
think-
this won't happen. So we agree and let's move on.
I think there's a real danger in the scale of Israel's response that you radicalize a whole new generation
Agreed.
of Palestinians. I think that's a real danger.
So
and
perhaps-
by the way, I've said that. We can agree on
So
that.
perhaps it was Israel's actions before October 7th that radicalized the soldiers who invaded. So you agree with me. So let's move on.
No, I don't. No, nothing
You just
justifies what they did. Let me ask you about the reaction that you've had from certain people who I think at one stage you had a good relationship with.
Sure.
One is Jordan Peterson,
Yeah.
and the other one Ben Shapiro. Let's talk about Jordan first.
Sure.
You've had a bit of a to and fro with him, but what is your view of him?
I think Jordan and I actually agree on many issues. I think the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I think we have a lot more in common than we have that we disagree on. We have different views of the world on certain things. I think we approach him from different places. He's far more in his mind, whereas I've been more in a physical realm than he does. I have nothing against Jordan. I don't dislike him. I do find it, and I must be honest, a bit disingenuous and hypocritical that he speaks mental strength and then ends up addicted to an antidepressant. I don't think he should ever take antidepressants ever. I've been through worse than what he's been through, and I didn't take a single drug. However, I have nothing against the guy. He says very intelligent things, and I'd be interested to argue with him or discuss or debate with him, but I think we'd actually agree on most points, to be honest with you. I don't think he may be unhappy with somehow how I've lived my life and some things I've done, but we've already discussed the fact that I come from the lowest income area of the UK, and most people around me were selling drugs, so at least I didn't do that. So I'm not going to allow somebody who's a professor in a university who's had an easy life come along and tell me how people from the streets should survive. You have to find a way out. Let's get rich or die trying. But I have nothing against the guy. I just think that he's been a bit hypocritical. And then, truthfully, the only time I've been genuinely a bit appalled by any of his actions was the tweet he made on Israel-Palestine when he said, "Give them hell." I know that's an easy thing to say, and it's an expression that people use and they throw it around flippantly. But I think when you actually wish hell upon other human beings, I think it's a disgusting thing to do, because hell is that 15-year-old girl with no legs and her parents were dead.
Well, hell is...
you see her crying her eyes out, begging to die. That is hell. And I don't think you should genuinely wish hell on anyone, Israel or Palestinian, anyone. I'm a humanist. I don't want anybody to die.
Well, he did.
When he was wishing hell on an entire population,
he did express regret for the way he phrased it.
And he should,
and
because it's disgusting. I've not wished hell on the Israelis. I've not wished hell on the Israeli state. I don't want any Israeli civilian to go through what that 15-year-old Palestinian girl's going through. Not a single one. Provoking terrorism.
So out of interest, what would you have done if you'd been Israel after October the 7th?
That's a really interesting question. And I think there's people who are more qualified than me to answer.
Given that Hamas last week said, we're going to try and do the same thing again and again and again, what would you do to defend the people of Israel?
Good question. They have the Iron Dome, which is largely effective. I think that their border security is usually effective. It's very interesting that it wasn't on this
So you would
day.
say they would do nothing then, other than tighten up security?
I think if I was truthfully, I'll answer the question. If I was truthfully in charge of Israel, I would have found out how our border was penetrated. I would have made sure that was impossible to do. I would have had large conversations and discourse during that period, which would probably take weeks to ensure that my border was impenetrable, because we were at no genuine threat of a repeat attack. And then I would make it clear that there will be some repercussion unless we can come to peace terms. I don't think
But Hamas doesn't want peace.
Of course not. But I'm saying
that's their
fine.
stated position.
Of course.
So does it mean
okay,
peace
you're
with
asking
Hamas?
what I'd do. I would have found out. First things first. I'm a man. So first things first, you fix the problem. Okay, our border's been penetrated. How do we make sure that doesn't happen again?
Sure,
How did it happen? Internal investigation.
Of course.
Let's make sure the border's secure. Now our civilians are safe. Our civilians are safe, which buys us time. Let's have a conversation and see if we can actually reason with Hamas. If we can't, then there might be some military intervention.
Then what?
But there certainly wouldn't be bombing hospitals, cruise missiling refugee camps. There wouldn't be any of the things that's going on now. Absolutely
You
not.
wouldn't try and attack the people that
No,
did it.
because this is a rushed and emotional response. And that's what I would have prevented. I would have made sure as a man I didn't make a rushed and emotional response.
So you'd be more like Neville Chamberlain.
And I don't know why you keep saying this man thing. It was men that made these emotional responses. Are you trying to assume that it was women? Who are the people in power in Israel? Let me just give you, I don't even have to, do anything. The list speaks for itself that it's just men. Come on, what the fuck are you saying, bro? Men are just as capable of making rash, emotional, and probably illogical decisions as well. Come on, bro.
Trying to do peace with the Nazis and Winston Churchill trying to kill them.
Well,
yeah,
that's an interesting question.
You're an appeaser, not a warrior.
Well, I still think I'm a warrior, but I think that when you're a warrior, you have to be very capable and...
But that's what Neville Chamberlain's view was. We should do peace with the Nazis.
You have to be very understanding of your power, and you have to use it responsibly. And just like I said earlier, when I'm trying to be responsible about what I say to the young men of the world, I would understand as Israel, I must be responsible with my massive military might to make sure I don't kill civilians. And I would sit and try and make a measured response, and I'd be a professional, and I would consider them human beings, and I would secure my border and try and come up with a plan better than, oh no, I'm mad, I'm emotional now, let's go kill everyone. I think that's the wrong response. Correct. I don't think that's the right thing to do.
We've spent a long time talking. You're going to find out at some stage today or in the next few days whether you're going to get your possessions back. That'll either happen or not happen, but then there's likely to be a trial, and that will determine how you spend the next 10 years of your life, almost certainly, which is a sobering thought for anyone. When you look back on the whole arc of the last few years, you've expressed some regret because of your turning to Islam, your change in your philosophy from a religious perspective. You've acknowledged that some of the stuff you used to do was immoral. Do you look at the journey you've gone on here and think that in a way, notwithstanding the Matrix and everything else, that maybe you yourself could have done things differently to avoid being in this position?
Absolutely. I'm a man and I take absolute self-accountability. You have to, as a man, your superpower is looking in the mirror and understanding everything that happens to you, both good and bad, to a degree is your fault. It could have all been influenced. I could have avoided all of this. I could have avoided the Matrix attacks, I could have avoided jail cell, if you don't let me using that term. I could have avoided all the negative press. I could have chosen to work in Starbucks and just stayed a nobody. I made choices that put me in this position. I take responsibility for them. I said things on the internet in a satirical way on videos that got 110 views when YouTube was brand new that I did not expect to become the most viral videos in the world because I didn't expect to become the most famous and known person on the planet. That's all true. I'm not saying I have no part to play in any of this. However, I can still say that I'm completely innocent. I can still say that it is only my fame and notoriety that has inspired the prosecution service to try and even put me in jail in the first place. I can still say that there's some unfair policing in the world depending on your political views. I can still say all of those things while accepting absolute responsibility for the situation I am in.
Andrew Tate, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I mean, you can say it, but how true has it become? Whatever. Anyhow, that was a riveting interview. I expected to laugh. I knew there was going to be some funny moments, but I also did not expect to agree with Andrew on a lot of his points too. And some of them were pretty sound, I'm not going to lie. But Piers, once again, did another banger. I hope in 2+ years, I can be on an interview with Piers Morgan. I wanted to be on an interview with Conan O'Brien, but the show's over. I don't think I'll ever get that chance again. And when I came to that realization, it was the saddest day of my life. Piers is now that new hope. So, with that being said, please subscribe to the channel. Get me up. We need to hit that first milestone of 100. And then from there, we're going to skyrocket. So, until then, thank you for joining me. This is Tsunami, shining out. Peace.